Little Ash Girl, Cinderella. Once upon a time, there was a rich man who lived happily with his wife and their only daughter. One day, the wife became very ill, and on her deathbed, she called her daughter and said, "My dear child, I must leave you, but when I am in heaven, I will look down upon you. Plant a tree on my grave, and when you wish for something, shake it, and you shall have it. If you are ever in trouble, I will send help to you. Just remain pious and good." After saying this, she closed her eyes and died. The child wept and planted a tree on her mother's grave. The tree didn't need any water because the girl's tears were enough to keep it alive. The snow covered the grave like a white cloth, and when the sun melted it away, the tree grew green again. The man then married another woman, who had 2 daughters of her own. They were beautiful in appearance, but proud, arrogant, and wicked in heart. After the wedding, when all 3 came to the house, the poor child's troubles began. "What is this useless creature doing in the room?" said the stepmother. "Away with her to the kitchen. If she wants to eat bread, she must earn it. She can be our servant." Then the stepsisters took away her clothes and dressed her in an old gray dress. "This is good enough for you," they said, laughing at her and leading her to the kitchen. There, the poor child had to do hard work, like getting up early to carry water, making fires, cooking, washing, and cleaning. The stepsisters caused her endless suffering, making fun of her, and even throwing peas and lentils in the ashes, making her sit and pick them out all day long. When she was tired at night, she had no bed to sleep in, but had to lie down in the ashes next to the hearth. Because she was always digging around in the ashes and dirt, she looked dirty and dusty, so they gave her the name Little Ash Girl. One time, the king hosted a ball that was supposed to last for 3 days in all its splendor. His son, the prince, was to choose a bride from among the guests, and the 2 proud stepsisters were also invited. "Little Ash Girl," they called, "come up here, comb our hair, brush our shoes, and buckle them up. We're going to the ball with the prince." Little Ash Girl did her best to dress them up as nicely as possible, but they only gave her scolding in return. And when they were finished, they asked mockingly, "Little Ash Girl, you would like to go to the ball, wouldn't you?" "Oh yes, but how can I go? I have no clothes." "No," said the eldest, "that would suit me fine if you were seen there. We would be ashamed if people heard that you were our sister. You belong in the kitchen, where you have a bowl of lentils, and when we come back, they must be sorted, and be careful that no bad ones are left, or else you will not get anything good." With that, they left, and Little Ash Girl stood and watched them go. And when she could no longer see them, she went sadly into the kitchen and poured the lentils onto the stove, where there was a big pile of them. "Oh," she said with a sigh, "I have to sort through these until midnight and can't let my eyes close, and if they hurt me so much, if only my mother knew." Then she knelt down in front of the stove in the ashes and was about to start reading, when 2 white doves flew in through the window and settled next to the lentils on the stove. They nodded their heads and said, "Little Ash Girl, shall we help you sort the lentils?" "Yes," answered Little Ash Girl. "The bad ones in the crop. The good ones in the pot." And they pecked, and started eating the bad ones and leaving the good ones. And in a quarter of an hour, the lentils were so clean that there wasn't a single bad one left, and Little Ash Girl was able to put them all in the pot. Then the doves said, "Little Ash Girl, if you want to see your sisters dance with the prince, climb up to the pigeon coop." Little Ash Girl followed them and climbed up to the last rung of the ladder where she could see into the hall. She saw her sisters dancing with the prince, and her eyes were dazzled by the flickering and shining of thousands of lights. After she had seen enough, she climbed back down and felt heavy-hearted, lying down in the ashes and falling asleep. The next morning, the 2 sisters came into the kitchen, and when they saw that Little Ash Girl had cleaned the lentils, they were angry because they wanted to scold her. Since they couldn't do that, they began to talk about the ball and said, "Little Ash Girl, it was so much fun at the dance. The prince, the most handsome man in the world, led us there, and one of us will become his wife." "Yes," said Little Ash Girl, "I saw the lights flickering, it must have been magnificent." "How did you manage that?" asked the older sister. "I stood on the pigeon coop," replied Little Ash Girl. When the older sister heard this, envy consumed her, and she ordered that the pigeon coop be torn down immediately. Little Ash Girl had to comb and clean up after them again, and the youngest sister, who still had a little pity in her heart, said, "Little Ash Girl, when it's dark, you can go and look through the windows from the outside." "No," said the older sister, "that will just make her lazy." "You have a sack full of chickpeas, Little Ash Girl, separate the good from the bad and be diligent, and if you haven't cleaned them by tomorrow, I'll pour them into the ashes, and you'll have to starve until you've picked them all out." Little Ash Girl sat down sadly by the hearth and poured out the chickpeas. Then the doves flew back in and said kindly, "Little Ash Girl, shall we pick out the chickpeas for you?" "Yes," she replied. "The bad ones in the crop. The good ones in the pot. Pick, pick. Pick, pick." Went the sounds as fast as if there were 12 hands at work. And when they were finished, the dove said, "Little Ash Girl, do you also want to go to the ball and dance?" "Oh my God," she said, "how can I go in my dirty clothes?" "Go to the little tree on your mother's grave, shake it, and wish for beautiful clothes, but come back before midnight." So Little Ash Girl went out, shook the little tree, and said, "Little tree, shake and quiver. Throw beautiful clothes down to me." As soon as she said this, a splendid silver dress appeared before her, with pearls, silk stockings with silver garters, and silver slippers, and everything else that belonged to it. Little Ash Girl took everything home, and when she had washed and dressed herself, she was as beautiful as a rose washed by dew. And as she came to the front door, there was a carriage with 6 feathered horses and servants in blue and silver, who lifted her in and drove her to the king's castle at a gallop. The prince saw the carriage stop at the gate and thought a foreign princess was arriving. He went down the stairs himself, lifted Little Ash Girl out, and led her into the hall. And when the glow of the many thousand lights fell on her, she was so beautiful that everyone was amazed, and the sisters were also there, annoyed that someone was more beautiful than they were, but they never thought that it was Little Ash Girl who lay at home in the ashes. The prince danced with Little Ash Girl and royal honors were bestowed upon her. He also thought to himself, "I have to choose a bride, and I can choose no one but her." Little Ash Girl lived in luxury and joy for so long after living in ashes and sadness, but when midnight came and it was not yet 12, she got up, bowed, and despite the prince's pleas, she refused to stay any longer. The prince took her downstairs, where the carriage was waiting, and she drove away in splendor just as she had arrived. When Little Ash Girl returned home, she went back to the little tree on her mother's grave and said, "Little tree, shake and quiver. Take the clothes back for yourself." Then the tree took back its clothes, and Little Ash Girl put on her old ash dress. She went back, made her face dusty, and lay down in the ashes to sleep. The next morning, the stepsisters came, looking disgruntled and silent. Little Ash Girl said, "You must have had a lot of fun last night." "No, there was a princess there. The prince danced with her almost all night, but nobody knew who she was or where she came from." "Was it perhaps the one who rode in the magnificent carriage with 6 horses?" said Little Ash Girl. "How do you know that?" "I was standing at the door and saw her pass by," replied Little Ash Girl. "From now on, stay with your work," said the older stepsister, looking at Little Ash Girl angrily. "What do you need to be standing at the door for?" Little Ash Girl had to clean the stepsister's room for the 3rd time, and as a reward, they gave her a bowl of peas to sort. "And don't you dare leave your work," the older stepsister called after her. Little Ash Girl thought, "If only my doves don't stay away," and her heart beat a little faster. But the doves came again, just like the previous night, and said, "Little Ash Girl, shall we read the peas for you?" "Yes, put the bad ones in your crop, the good ones in the pot." The doves quickly picked out the bad ones and said, "Little Ash Girl, shake the little tree. It will drop even more beautiful clothes for you. Go to the ball, but be careful to come back before midnight." Little Ash Girl went and said, "Little tree, shake and quiver, throw beautiful clothes down for me." Then an even more magnificent dress fell down, made entirely of gold and precious stones, along with gold-threaded stockings and golden slippers. When Little Ash Girl put it on, it shone like the midday sun. Outside, a carriage with 6 white horses and servants dressed in red and gold awaited her. The prince was already standing on the stairs and led her into the hall. If they were amazed by her beauty yesterday, they were even more so today. The stepsisters stood in the corner, pale with envy. If they had known that little Ash Girl was the one who lay at home in the ashes, they would have died of envy. But the prince wanted to know who the foreign princess was, where she came from and where she was going. He had people stationed on the street to keep watch, and in order to prevent her from running away quickly, he had the stairs completely coated with pitch. Little Ash Girl danced and danced with the prince, was full of joy and did not think of midnight. Suddenly, while they were dancing, she heard the clock strike and remembered how the doves had warned it. She became frightened, rushed to the door, and flew straight down the stairs. But because they were coated with pitch, one of the golden slippers got stuck, and in her panic, she did not think to take it with. As she took the last step from the stairs, it struck 12, and the carriage and horses disappeared. Little Ash Girl was left standing on the dark street in its rags. The prince had followed her, found the golden slipper on the stairs, pulled it off and picked it up. But when he got downstairs, everything had disappeared, even the people stationed as guards came and said they had seen nothing. Little Ash Girl was glad that it had not turned out worse and went home. She lit her dim oil lamp, hung it in the chimney, and lay down in the ashes. It wasn't long before the two stepsisters arrived and called out, "Little Ash Girl, get up and light us up." Little Ash Girl yawned and pretended to wake up from sleep. But in the glow, she heard one of them say, "God knows who the cursed princess is, that she would like buried in the earth." The prince only danced with her, and when she was gone, he didn't want to stay anymore, and the whole festival came to an end. "It was as if all the lights went out at once," said the other. Little Ash Girl knew very well who the foreign princess was, but it didn't say a word. The prince, however, thought, if all else fails, the slipper will help me find my bride, and had it announced that whoever the golden slipper fit would become his wife. But it was much too small for everyone, and some could not even get their feet in, even if the two slippers were joined together. Finally, it was the turn of the two stepsisters to try it on. They were happy because they had small, beautiful feet and thought, "It can't fail for us, if only the prince had come to us immediately." "Listen," said the mother secretly, "here's a knife for you, and if the slipper is still too tight, cut a piece off your foot. It hurts a little, but what does that matter? It'll pass soon enough, and one of you will become a queen." The eldest went into her room and tried on the slipper. The toe went in, but the heel was too big. So she took the knife and cut off a piece of her heel until she could squeeze her foot into the slipper. She went out to the prince, and when he saw that she had the slipper on, he said she was the bride, led her to the carriage, and wanted to ride away with her. But when he came to the gate, the doves were sitting on top and called out, "Ruck-dee-guck, ruck-dee-guck! Blood is in the shoe. The shoe is too small. The right bride is still at home after all." The prince stooped down and looked at the slipper, from which blood was oozing. He realized that he had been deceived and returned with the false bride. The mother then said to her second daughter, "Take the slipper, and if it is too small for you, cut off the tip of your toes instead." The daughter took the slipper to her chamber, and when her foot was too large for it, she gritted her teeth and cut off a big piece of her toes, and quickly squeezed her foot into the slipper. When she came out wearing the slipper, he thought she was the right bride and wanted to continue with her. However, when they reached the gate, the doves cried out again, "Ruck-dee-guck, ruck-dee-guck! Blood is in the shoe. The shoe is too small. The right bride is still at home after all." The prince looked down and saw that the white stockings of the bride were dyed red and the blood had risen high. He brought her back to the mother and said, "This is not the right bride either, but is there not another daughter in the house?" "No," said the mother, "only a nasty little Ash Girl is still there, sitting down in the ashes. The slipper cannot fit her." She also did not want to have her called, until the prince insisted. Little Ash Girl was then called, and when she heard that the prince was there, she quickly washed her face and hands fresh and clean. When she entered the room, she bowed, and the prince handed her the golden slipper and said, "Try it on. And if it fits you, you will be my wife." Then she slipped off the heavy shoe from her left foot, put it on the golden slipper, and pressed it a little. She stood in it as if it was molded to her foot. And when she looked up, the prince recognized the beautiful princess again and called out, "That is the right bride." The stepmother and the two proud sisters were frightened and turned pale, but the prince took little Ash Girl away and lifted her into the carriage, and as they drove through the gate, the doves cried out, Ruck-de-guck, ruck-de-guck. No blood in the shoe. The shoe is not too small. He is bringing home the right bride after all.